Buenas, buenas a Bookaccion. Mi nombre es Alejandro Boucabeille. Como ya saben, y estamos acá saludándolos desde Innsbruck, Austria, en el programa educativo que hoy les queremos presentar a un conferenciante, campeón de memoria del 2008, que es Chester Santos, y que creo que hoy en día se encuentra en estos tiempos del COVID-19 en los Estados Unidos, en California. Welcome, everybody. Chester, I think you're actually in California right now, or isn't it? Or are you traveling? Because through your social media, I see that you're giving a lot of conferences, that you're traveling quite a lot. Although we had COVID-19, where are you right now?
Yeah, so I'm currently in California. If you see me posting from somewhere else, it was recorded because when I'm doing my presentations around the world, I record a bunch of videos in those locations and later post
You
them
posted.
to Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and so on. So some people get confused and think that I'm there at that moment, but
Yeah.
actually it's recorded earlier.
So
So I'm
you're not a
currently,
danger now, right now in COVID. Now you are safe in quarantine at home.
exactly, California for
Perfect.
now.
Not that somebody wants to follow you and just decides to travel around the world. It's probably not possible now. Chester,
No,
I just introduced you in Spanish. You were the US memory champion in 2008, right?
that's correct.
How
Yeah.
does it feel to have such a good memory? Because many people, not only old people, say they have problems with the memory. Even students, young people, complain about it, that maybe they cannot memorize or understand what the subject is about at university, at college, at school. How does it feel to have such a good memory? And is a good memory something that you're born with? Or do you think really everybody can learn to have a good memory?
Yeah, so really my area is not what you first mentioned. It's not necessarily that anyway. People worried about their memory as they're getting older. Really, what my area of expertise is something that all age ranges can benefit from, and that is developing your memory skills. So, in fact, the ability to remember names, facts, figures, languages, and so on. That is a skill that anyone can develop with training and practice. Now, of course, some people are born with more of a natural inclination towards being able to remember things, but it might be that they just have, from the beginning, a better approach or a better strategy. What I firmly believe is that no matter where you are at today, in terms of your ability to remember things, you can dramatically improve that with the right techniques and a little bit of training and practice. So that's really my area. I give presentations all around the world on how just about anyone can develop powerful memory skills and use those skills to become more successful in one's career. This is valuable in many ways in your personal life. And also, of course, it's huge for those students that are in school.
Mm. How did you start? Maybe you could tell us a little bit about when is it the first time that you say, well, I'm not so bad in memory. Maybe I could improve that, learn these skills, and then compete on a national level.
Yeah, so what happened was I was often told growing up, I often got the comment from people. People would say, wow, you have a really good memory. I would just get that comment a lot. So, with that in just the back of my mind, one night, way back in the year 2000, so like 20 years ago, I was flipping channels and I happened to catch a segment on ABC's 2020. It was a very popular evening news program in the United States. There was a segment on the United States Memory Championship. And when I saw that, it kind of sparked my interest because people were saying that I had a good memory. So I thought to myself, maybe I can do well in this competition. But when I looked into what the best people in the country were scoring in various events. They were memorizing entire decks of playing cards, hundreds of computer generated random digits, hundreds of names, tons of lines of poetry and all of that in just minutes perfectly. I quickly found out that although I did have probably a better than average memory, I was nowhere near that level. So that's when I started doing research. Okay, what are ways uh, as to how people can improve their memory? And I read all the books out there that I could find. I did a lot of online research. I played around, experimented with many different techniques. I found what was working best for me personally. And then I stuck to really just training myself in that small subset of techniques that I felt were working best until eventually I did manage to win the United States Memory Championship. And since then, I've spent now the last 12 plus years training other people around the world in that small
Wow.
subset of techniques that I feel can benefit them the most right away in their career, personal life, and also to help them out if they might be in school.
Mm. What was the most challenging thing on this US national competition in 2008 where you won the championship? What did you have to memorize?
Oh, it's pretty intense. There are many different events. They start out with more of written style events, almost like, an exam that you're taking. And then after that, they narrow the entire field down to just 7 finalists. And from there, it becomes more of a stage type thing because at one point it was televised. It was on TV, the competition, so they wanted to make it like more entertaining for audiences to
Wow.
watch. But to go over the ones that are a little bit more like a written exam, they had sheets of computer generated random digits. You would have 5 minutes to memorize the longest sequence, and then you would have, depending on the year, sometimes you would have 5 minutes to write it back out. Sometimes you had 10 minutes. They've changed the rules up. But basically, you get the idea. You've got to write that out from memory perfectly after just looking at it for 5 minutes. Over 100 digits, digit sequence is a pretty good score. Although now some people can do like hundreds of digits in 5 minutes.
Wow.
Back then, like 100 plus was, pretty good. Again, it's like hundreds of names, decks of playing cards, things like that. And when you get to the finals, one of the more difficult competitions for me personally, one of the more difficult events was one in which they would bring out people, 7 people in a row. They would have one person give their name, first name, middle name, last name, their phone number. Back when I was competing, it was really long. It was like a 12-digit number because they had area code, 7-digit number, and like a work extension. So it was really long, not just 7 digits. They had favorite hobbies, favorite foods, their residence, state, city, zip code, all of this information. They would just rattle it off. Then the next person would come on, rattle it off. And it was 5 to 7 people in a row, depending on the year of the competition. And then they would just randomly bring out a person, one of those people, and just say, okay, what was his birthday? What was her phone number? So that one is really, and it's just thrown at you very, very quickly. So that one I was having difficulty with in certain years that I competed, but in 2008, I got past that round, and then it was the final round was 2 decks of cards at the same time. And I've always been really, really good in that card memorization event in the US Memory Championship. So I was able to win it there. So hopefully that gives people an idea of what's involved in this US Memory Championship.
When you were confronting these people that randomly came back and asked you when was my birthday, what are my hobbies, etc. I guess you need certain your technique, of course, that you improved. So you have to be very relaxed, or how does it? What do you do? What do you decide to do, or to act, or to react upon this information when it comes? You're probably a little nervous. You take a breath, and then what goes on in your head? You try to remember, but how can we try to understand this process of what goes on with your technique? What are you focusing on when they explain it?
Yeah, so there's a lot of things there that you kind of touched on all at once. One part of it is you do have to be very relaxed in order to most effectively remember, right? Things. So if you're very nervous, this can cause sort of memory blocks. It prevents things from getting maybe into your long-term memory, or even if you were able to file it away, definitely it prevents you from retrieving that information when you
But
need
but
it.
but you notice it in the moment itself, or you just know that, or do you notice it? I have a blockade now. Can we notice this?
No. So that's a separate thing.
Okay.
Let me first finish covering the part when you're putting it in. So there's a lot of different nerves is one thing, is what I wanted to say. Now, in order to reduce the nerves, though, the training and the practice improves your confidence, right, in those high pressure situations. So if you have spent a lot of time training your memory and you know that the techniques work, when you're in those high pressure situations, that would hopefully enable you to be a little bit more relaxed, right? So then comes the training and the practice, and that event is one of the more difficult ones in the entire competition, because you're putting many different techniques all together at once. And keep in mind also, that's the second to the last event of the United States National Memory Championship. So it's not like a normal everyday business situations or everyday life. You would never be hit with something that intense, right? And be expected to recall it under those conditions. So I just want to make that clear for people that are listening to this. We're talking about like an outlier type situation, right? So really, for practical purposes, if you will just make it a point to train your memory with the right techniques, it would probably help you to be more relaxed, and you would less experience those blocks and the recall. Now, the retrieval process, right? That's another. It's a separate thing, right? The encoding and the retrieval are two different situations, right? But under both, you can experience difficulty if you're not
Relax.
relaxed enough. Yeah.
But this first maybe the input and then the retrieving. Well, you are the champ. I could ask you 100 questions and you would memorize them, and then you could answer to me the 100 questions, I guess. But the input, of course, you said, you mentioned that you have a certain technique, but with the output, when you have to bring back the information, how can I imagine? Because normally I remember something that is of interest for me, no? I would say. For example, I'm
Yeah.
very good with history because I love history and all the dates, etc. I don't even have to think about remembering. It goes automatically. But sometimes when it comes to numbers, and probably in the championship, like mathematical or telephone numbers, so I don't know, I'm not very good. So I have to like focus and try something out, and I'm not so good because I guess I don't have a technique. But how do you do it?
Yeah, so it all comes down to the fact that you remember certain things because they're more interesting to you. If they're more interesting to you, you pay more attention to them, right? So focus and attention obviously is a huge part of what we remember. So my area of expertise is really taking anything at all. So things that, for instance, might not be so interesting to you, but they would be useful to you to know for business or in school, right? Things you need to know for the exam. Maybe you're not that interested in that stuff necessarily, but obviously you need to know it for the exam, or it would benefit you to know these certain things in business, right? So my area is helping you take anything at all and in a way make that information more interesting, at least to the brain. All right, in that how your brain works, we're going to take advantage of how your brain works, and with certain techniques effectively more effectively encode the information into your mind, your brain in the first place. Then it's going to be just as easy to retrieve it as those things that you're naturally remembering, right? Without any sort of technique, right? You're automatically remembering things from history because you were more, interested in those things, right? So that's my area. And there are just a wide range of techniques that you can learn depending on the information type. But there are three main principles, overarching principles that would apply no matter the specific technique. One is visualization. So turning whatever it is that you might want to remember into a simple image or series of images, something you can picture in your mind. That's one principle. Second thing, if you can, from there, involve additional senses as well. So not just see it, but in addition to seeing that image, maybe you can smell what you're seeing. You can hear it. Add more senses. As you do that, you're activating more areas of your brain and you are building more connections in your mind to the information. So that will make it easier to retrieve it later. And a third principle to keep in mind is while you are seeing and experiencing all of this stuff, try to make it in some way strange, unusual, out of the ordinary, because there is a psychological aspect to human memory, and that is all of us, with putting forth little to no effort at all, we tend to remember things that catch us by surprise, that are extraordinary in some way, right? So if right now where you are interviewing me at, if in that room location, if an elephant crashed into the room right now and started spraying water on you, if that actually happened right now, you would probably remember that for the rest of your life and always tell that story. Okay, you guys are never going to believe this. I was interviewing this memory guy for my podcast, and out of nowhere, an elephant just crashed into the room. You might tell that story for the rest of your life, right? It might be stuck in there forever without you even trying to commit that to memory, right? No effort, but it will just be stuck there. And that's because of the psychological aspect to human memory. We can actually, realizing that there's that aspect to how our mind works, we can harness it and apply it to things that would be useful, like names, presentations, important business related facts and figures, exam material, and so on.
So
those are three important principles that will apply no matter the specific technique. Now, there are a lot of different techniques, and the conference that you attended, I know I was able to quickly go over with the audience something called the story method. So you build a story in your mind, right? And as you're building that story, you want to keep in mind those three things that I just mentioned: the visual, additional senses, make it weird, unusual. Yeah.
that's what I wanted to say, that I saw you in Ciudad de las Ideas in Puebla, in Mexico. Now with all these techniques, do you remember all the conference, in 12 years? Could you tell me, for example, November 2014, I was giving in this conference, which examples did I give? Because maybe there's some differences, or because you have done, I guess, thousands or hundreds of workshops, conferences, no?
Yeah. I would remember a lot of that stuff just because I'm constantly training my memory, right? I'm really exercising my memory. So my memory is, I would say, still above average in general. even without, engaging with a specific technique. But really, that level of detail, hundreds or thousands of pieces of data,
It's
that's
too
when I
much.
recommend you would need to use the technique. So I would have had to consciously say, okay, I want to commit to memory that I
Yeah.
did this on this date, and these are the examples that I gave at this conference, and in this other
Mm.
conference I did this. But without having actually gone through the process of committing that to memory, encoding it into my memory with these very powerful techniques, I would not, be able to accurately remember hundreds, thousands of pieces of data. But the amazing thing is that if you do that, and in some cases it would be useful to do that, you can remember even thousands of pieces of data and recall them when you need them. The largest scale memory training demonstration that I've done so far was part of filming for PBS's Nova Science. It's a popular science show here in the US. I had memorized more than 4,000 pieces of data about the United States Congress. So it was all 535 members, everyone's first name, last name, state, district number, political party, all the committees. It ended
Oh.
up being more than 4,000 pieces of data.
Mm.
The point is that it is possible, and it's really extraordinary what you can do with your memory with training and practice. Probably most beneficial, I think, for your listeners,
Mm.
people that will end up listening and or watching this podcast, would be to go through an exercise like I did at the CDI conference, with random words. That way people can understand
What do you mean?
yeah, and experience it, right, for themselves. So let's just do that one that I did at CDI. So what I would do is have everyone memorize quickly a random list of words, right? It's going to be, the word list will be, and people, or the point is to try to commit these to memory, people watching this. It will be monkey, iron, rope, kite, house, paper, shoe, worm, envelope, pencil, river, rock, tree, cheese, and dollar. Now, most of the time when I recite that to audiences, people look at me as if, come on, I'm not going to be able to do that, not unless you give me a lot of time to do it, right? And if someone were to be given, a decent amount of time to do that, how they would normally approach it is they would write out those words and just write out the words over and over again. Or
Like
they
it.
would recite the words
Mm.
over and over again, right? Or just
Mm.
read them over and over again, right? Until
Mm.
they feel that it's been drilled into their head. That's how most people commit things to memory, right?
That's what they teach us to a certain level, no? Just like,
Yeah, exactly. Just rote memorization, right? We are never in school taught more efficient ways to encode, put information into our brain for more effective retrieval later on. A
mm.
much better approach would be one of these techniques, the
Mm.
story method. So build a story. So let's go through that now. The first word I had given was monkey. So I want for everybody to imagine that they see a monkey. Just picture this monkey dancing around. It's making monkey noises, whoop, 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 whatever monkey would sound like. I'm working on the monkey impression. The point here is to see and hear the monkey, okay? The monkey now picks up a gigantic iron because that was the next word that I gave. So just see this monkey in your head, visualize it. You can see this monkey, it's dancing around with a gigantic iron like you would iron your clothes with. See it like a movie or cartoon playing in your head. The iron starts to fall, but a rope attaches itself to the iron. Maybe even imagine that you feel that rope. Maybe it feels sort of rough, all right? Interact with the rope, okay? You look up the rope, you see the other end of the rope is attached to a kite. That kite is flying around in the air, maybe even try and touch the kite, okay? The kite you see now crashes into the side of a house. Really see it smash into the house. The house, you notice now, is completely covered in paper. For some strange reason, it's completely covered in paper because the next word I gave was paper, okay? out of nowhere, a shoe appears now and it starts to walk all over the paper. Maybe it's messing up the paper, that shoe. The shoe smells pretty badly, so you decide to investigate and see why. You look inside of the shoe and you see a little worm, a smelly worm crawling around inside of that shoe. You really see the worm. The worm now jumps out of the shoe and into an envelope or envelope. Maybe it's going to mail itself or something, all right? Envelope was next. Out of nowhere, a pencil appears and it starts to write all over the envelope. Maybe it's addressing it, that pencil. The pencil now jumps into a river, and there's a huge splash like you would never expect to see when that pencil hits the river. The river is crashing up against a giant rock. It's crashing up against a giant rock. The rock flies out of the river and into a tree. This tree, you notice, is growing cheese. Probably haven't seen a tree like that. This one's growing cheese. And out of each piece of cheese shoots a dollar. A dollar shoots out of each piece of cheese. The last word was dollar. Now I'm going to go through this again very quickly. And your job, Alejandro, and for people listening, they will just try to replay through this story, re-visualize the story.
I think I can manage.
We start off with, you probably got it, but just in case people aren't as good as you, let's try it one more time through. To get it perfect, there was a monkey. What was it dancing around with? An iron. What attached? A rope. The other end of the rope was attached to the kite. The kite then crashed into the house. What was it covered in? Paper. What walked on it? A shoe. What crawled in the shoe? It was a worm. The worm jumped into what? An envelope. What wrote on it? Was a pencil. Yeah, that jumped into the river, which was crashing into the rock. That flew into the tree, which was growing cheese. And what shot out? Money. A dollar, right? So now, I'm sure you had it on the first try, but in case anyone was lacking after the first try, now I'm sure they've got it, everybody's got it down. They can recite now the entire random list of words by simply, in your mind, playing through the story. Each major object that you see will give you the next word. So give it a try, and people that are, watching the podcast can follow along. Give it a try.
So with you, it was easy for me to remember because you were telling me this nice creative story.
Yep, give it a try.
Perfect. I tell the story.
Yeah.
Okay. There was a monkey holding an iron. The iron was next to a rope, and the rope had a kite, and the kite was leading to a house of paper. And on the paper there was a shoe, and on the shoe there was a worm. It was stinking.
Yep.
And, the worm crawled into an envelope, maybe to send itself. And there was a pencil, so write the address. Then there was the river, and the river flew towards a rock. And next to the rock there was a tree, and the tree grew cheese, and from the cheese there was a dollar coming out.
Awesome, man! Great job, very nice, excellent. So you did, perfectly there. That was perfect, 100%. And that is just one of the techniques that I'm talking about. So there are many different techniques that memory champions like myself use to pull off what at first seemed like, wow, these are crazy feats of memory, but really, there's nothing different about my brain compared to everyone else's. It's just the right technique and a little bit of practice. That's really all there is to it. And I want to make it clear that, in interviews like this, and, when I'm on a TV show or something, I like to, in a few minutes, just do random words like that, or at a conference when there's limited time. But this applies to anything at all, even very complex types of information. This, for instance, these images could represent points of a presentation that you wanted to give. So if you were going to give a talk, for instance, about healthcare in the U.S., in the U.S., healthcare is always a hot topic for discussion over here. Maybe the first image is of a stethoscope where, the doctor uses that to check your heartbeat, right? You're going to talk about, that's going to just represent healthcare, okay? you're going to hit on in the presentation the high cost of healthcare in the United States. Maybe shooting out of the stethoscope are $100 bills that are shooting out of it all over the place, right? Next thing you want to cover in the presentation, in order to get certain things covered, the way our system is set up, you're going to have to find a way to cut through all of the red tape. So maybe wrapping itself around the $100 bills with all of this red tape. So you can see how this would help you to give even a presentation, at least minimizing the amount of notes that you use so that you can be more engaging, more interactive with your audience rather than just reading off the note cards or just reading your PowerPoint slides the entire time. So that's just one, business related professional example. There, even for that simple story method, if you are creative, right? If you use your creativity and your imagination, again there, and just think about it, you can apply even such a simple technique in very powerful and useful ways.
I think it goes, you can, as you said, the creativity and the memory, we can exercise both in one action, no? And I think we normally are like we don't use the potential, no? Because you said we all have like your brain, you just have the practice. But actually everybody is capable of this, no? And this is like a positive message, because normally we think, oh, they are geniuses, they are wunderkinds, they are like very special, and we don't have the capacity, no?
Yeah, I mean, we often have that perception of people that are extraordinary in, one or more areas. We marvel at their ability, and we may not reach necessarily that like world champion level at
Yeah, of
whatever
course.
they might be doing. But what is important to know, though, is that if we will learn, again, the right approach and put in some practice, we can dramatically improve our abilities, and not just memory, but in any area, right? It's working on developing your skills, right? My area is not math, but I've seen these people that do the instant mental calculations. And again, they have a technique, right? They have an approach, and they've put in the training and practice where they can, do those calculations in a split second. But again, it is developing skills. Anyone can do this. And if you put your mind to it, it's really amazing what you can do.
How would you do it? Because I was thinking, when I guess you started when you were in college, but you had already in school a certain degree of being very good at it. For example, history. We have the Roman emperors, and at the beginning it's easy, Nero, Claudius, etc. But the last 200, 300 years, they have like 3, 4 names, sometimes the same names, sometimes very complicated names. How would you approach that?
Yeah, so you are bringing up another situation where it would be very difficult without a technique, without a system, right? So your natural ability, I guess, in terms of without using any technique, right? To remember a lot of that, again, is better than average because you are interested in that area. But even so, you might reach a point where it becomes difficult, right? Because they all have the same name, as you mentioned. But if you will use mental filing systems, so something else, and interestingly enough, it was used by the Romans, the Roman orators. It's a technique that originated with the ancient Greeks. It was known as the method of loci, L-O-C-I, meaning location. It was also used later in history by the Romans. It's been known as the Roman room method. Modern memorizers like myself refer to this technique as the journey method. Those are 3 different names for the same thing. Basically, it's using locations from your environment as storage places for images that remind you of what you want to remember. So for instance, you could use your current residence, maybe the front door, maybe the refrigerator, the kitchen sink, and you would place images there that represent what you want to remember. So in the case of, I was talking about points from the presentation about healthcare, right? Instead of, so this is a different option, okay? Instead of building the story, you might imagine that at your front door, there was the gigantic stethoscope, maybe somehow checking the heartbeat of the front door, right? And instead of the $100 bills shooting out of the stethoscope, maybe then at the refrigerator, there's the $100 bills. At the kitchen sink, there's all of the red tape, okay? So instead of building a story in your mind, you will just walk through your residence. At the different locations, you will see the various images, and that will remind you of what you want to remember. Now, this technique I would normally recommend when there are hundreds or thousands of pieces of data. So when there is a lot of information to remember, I would start to use more mental filing systems, like mental filing cabinets, basically is what you're building, instead of just building that story. The story method I would recommend when it is just a lesser amount of data, basically.
So we could say there are several techniques, and each technique has like a different area where it's best. And
exactly.
right, okay. And also that, of course, I guess with time you become better and faster, because if I have to think about how can I associate the money in my room, maybe with the fridge, maybe it takes time, no? Because like to have like something creative that it stays in my head, no?
Yeah, totally. And that's a common reaction to these techniques. A lot of people think at first, well, geez, that's maybe, might be more work. But in fact, there is work up front. But once you have established, for instance, all of your mental filing cabinets and you have experience using the systems, it becomes, this happens very, very quickly. Within just a second or so, you can recall all of this information that you have stored at the various mental filing cabinets. But there is some work that you need to put in up front. So for instance, memorizing decks of playing cards in, less than 2 minutes as I used to do it. One part is learning, okay, where am I going to file away all of these images for the
You
cards?
have it prepared already.
Yes, exactly. Have that really well prepared so that in my head, I can traverse through that in, like 10 seconds in my head, all of the locations, right? So then it becomes so much quicker to retrieve later the images that I've stored there. So again, I keep on saying, I know this is a skill that you need to develop, but it's totally true in that, like playing the piano or, playing tennis, whatever it is, with the training and practice, you become more efficient, right? It becomes, and the right technique becomes more automatic as you continue to practice with it.
The last two questions, Chester. What is your main your main clients are business people or schools, universities, or can you like where's the niche, the special need? And the other question would be, you mentioned that you're trying to constantly train. So for example, you go out and in your head you're already training, or could you give us some examples of how do you train on this level that you are? And maybe another question would be, do you have any, or what do you read, for example? Do you have any particular interests, especially in memory, but also how do you, or what do you read? What do you like to read? Or any recommendations that you have for us? Maybe the three last questions.
Okay, yeah. So my focus, what area do I focus on, is really business professionals mainly, but everything you mentioned, I have been a speaker for all of those types of organizations. So I've been even a speaker for things you wouldn't probably guess.
For example?
Groups of dentists, doctors, even a construction firm has hired me for multiple offices of theirs to give trainings for their employees. really any type of business in which they have a training and development a department to train their employees, they would bring in someone like me because when the employees develop their memory skills, then they are able to get more out of all of the other trainings the company's sending them to, right? So the company is going
That's
to send
true.
them to attend sales trainings, communications trainings, whatever it might be, right? They're going to remember more of that, right? Make better use of that if they first gone through memory skills training. So every area, every field you can imagine can benefit from memory training. And I have been a speaker and or corporate trainer for just many different areas. But my main focus is business professionals and executives. Um, Although, I mean, I've done universities, Harvard, Stanford, Berkeley. I've been a speaker there. Definitely, this is huge for especially graduate students where the information, for instance, law students can be very technical. There's a large amount of information that they need to commit to memory. Um, so, you know, I've been useful for those areas as well. My practice daily now really consists of, well, we're in a break now because of the COVID-19 pandemic. But usually, when I give a live in person presentation, I will open a lot of times with naming hundreds of people in the audience after just hearing every person's name one time. I also do the demonstration that I did do at La Ciudad de las Ideas, the CDI conference with the numbers. You know, people from the audience were calling
Right.
out numbers. We created a long number sequence. And I was averaging before all of this 3 to 5 presentations per week. So I was really exercising my memory in that way. As far as books, right now, it's just, I guess it's everyone what you're currently interested in. I'm currently reading a lot of business related books because that's my focus is developing my business at the moment. And, you know, like today, if we're talking about today, because of what's going on, I'm really focusing on reading books on like Facebook ads, internet marketing, because I need to transition a little bit more now to virtual training,
Mm.
promoting more my online courses. So I've had online courses that I've offered for many years, but I focused more on promoting those at live presentations. So I'm having to make a transition to internet marketing. So I'm reading books related to that at the moment. As far as what I would recommend to your listeners in general, one of my favorite books is How to Win Friends and Influence People,
Dale
which is
Carnegie.
a really good book to read for not just business, but also personal success. And I always quote that book in my presentations because one of the things mentioned in that book is that the sweetest sound to a person in any language is the sound of their own name, and also that everyone's favorite subject is themselves. So, in fact, by remembering people's names and things about them, it helps you to build better business, personal relationships. It helps you to build rapport with people. You know, if you meet someone at an event and the next time you see him, you can say, "Hey, John, how are you? How's your wife, Nancy? How was your last golf game?" They really appreciate that and they take notice of you more and they become more interested in you and what you're about, maybe what you're doing, right? This makes you more memorable to people that you're meeting. So that's a book, but I want to point out, not just because I mentioned it in my presentations, but because really I do think it's going to be a valuable book for just about anyone to read. So How to Win Friends and Influence People is one that I recommend. And personally, I'm reading internet marketing right now, but that might not be applicable to everybody out there.
So actually, if you want to go deep into a subject, it helps you a lot to have these memory skills, no? Because you can resume the book, you can put out the most important things. Actually, if you want to learn a language, you could also use it, no?
It's hugely beneficial. I mean, I use it all the time, and I'm so grateful all the time actually that I've spent the time to develop these memory skills. Currently, I'm working on learning Russian, so every day I'm listening to the Pimsleur. But you know, using the techniques, I'm able to commit the new vocabulary words very quickly to memory. And whether it's I'm learning about internet marketing, whatever it might be, you brought up exactly how you would use it. It's the key points. So deciding, all right, what were the key things from this chapter, commit it to memory using these techniques. So I don't find myself having to go back to the book, go back to the, you know, the internet, whatever page I was reading earlier, as people often do, because I've committed those main important points already to memory. I have been a speaker for software engineers, and I mentioned that I actually used to be a software engineer, believe it or not, before going into what I do now. And a lot of times software engineers will keep those reference manuals at their cubicle, and they're looking up the same 10, 20 commands all the time, right? Because they didn't commit it to memory. But if they'll take even just an hour or two to commit to memory the commands they're using quite often using these types of memory techniques, you're just so much more efficient on the job. So you're going to find, if you work on developing these skills, you're going to find so many uses for them.
Well, thanks so much for the invitation to continue improving ourselves, and especially the memory techniques. And yes, I think you have also an online course, right? So if
Yeah, so
you want to join.
yeah, thank you for asking about that in case anyone is interested in going deeper with this training. I've had various forms of an online course for over 10 years now, but I just released the latest version, which is all video training, and it is an online memory school. So people can go to memoryschool.net to check it out.
Perfect.
Memoryschool.net. I would visualize a net, maybe like a fishing net, to remember that's .net, not .com. So memoryschool.net. And during this crisis with everyone at home and looking for online learning opportunities, you'll see there an opportunity to start out for free. So basically, you'll see on the checkout code, and it will differ depending on when you're doing it, but you will be clear on how you can start out anyway with it for free at this time. So.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Chester. Harasho, spasiba, I think. My Russian
You got it.
best.
Good. Thank you. Yeah, you got it.
Thank you very much to all that will listen and watch us. Muchas gracias a todos. Saludos desde este bello país de Austria. Thank you very much again, and all the best from Austria, Chester.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Bye-bye.